just taking care of you, that's all.
Let me know when you start, right?
It's started. Yeah, all good.
Want to do mic check?
Check. Check 1, 2. Check. Check 1, 2, 3. Check.
Hello, Mike Calloway here.
Thank you, sir.
You're quite welcome.
Mr. McLeod, can I have a mic check, please?
Mr. McLeod.
Yes.
Test, 1, 2, 3, test. Test, 1, 2, 3, test.
Mr. McLeod will not need a microphone tonight. Ms. Suter, can I have a mic check, please?
Test, test, test.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Doucette, can I have a mic check, please?
Hello,
Can I get a little bit more?
hello, Clyde Doucette here.
Feels like a surprise birthday party.
I think we're close enough to
Sure.
the room's full of anticipation.
I think so.
1 minute. So just so we can start off with a little introduction, my name is Amanda Mumbercat. I'm the Executive Director with the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce. We're a business development organization with about almost 400 members right now, all over rural Cape Breton. Each election campaign, we try to bring you a debate. We're excited to be here to do that again this year, and we've partnered with 1015 The Hawk to pull it all together. And so I'd like to thank The Hawk for their contribution. We have our moderator with us again this year is Greg Morrow, who is the news director with The Hawk. So he'll be our moderator this evening. And we have a format that I hope will allow each of the candidates to state their intentions and the platforms of their parties. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We ran out of chairs. It's a good day when you run out of chairs at a chamber event. We like that. So thank you for coming. I'll let our candidates introduce themselves, but we will get started in just a few minutes. So thank you very much for coming. Oh, I should also mention, washrooms are outside and to your right at the end of the hallway if you need them, and emergency exit is just out the door right here on our left, on your right, my left. Thank you. Okay, so Greg.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes, it is nice to see a full house and this level of engagement in federal politics. My name is Greg Morrow, and the theme of our debate tonight is Building a Canada That Wins. We'll start with the introductions. I'll let the candidates introduce themselves, starting to my immediate left. Mr. Doucette.
How much time do we have to do the rest?
Just for the introduction, just 5 seconds or less would be good.
My name is Clyde Brissett.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Billy Joyce, proud father of 2 little girls, husband to 1 wife, and been involved in economic development for 20 years now.
Mike Calloway, I am your Liberal candidate for Cape Breton-Canso.
Alfie McLeod, and the Conservative candidate for Cape Breton-Canso.
Laura Suter, I'm the NDP candidate for Cape Breton-Canso.
Thank you. And for the format for our debate, we have several prepared questions that we will get to, as well as some questions that were submitted to the chamber. We will begin with opening statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes. And we will go in alphabetical order from my left on over. We will get through the prepared questions and move on to the submitted questions, and we'll end with closing remarks. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for their closing remarks. Our objective is to conclude the debate within 2 hours, no more, maybe less. So we're looking for clear, concise answers from the candidates. I'll give you a warning when we get to 30 seconds for your 2 and 3 minute segments and 15 seconds for the 1 minute answers. And just a reminder that sometimes candidates can go on and try and finish a thought, but it's better to be 5 seconds early or leave 5 seconds left over than to finish 5 seconds late and not finish your thought. So, and plus, when we get into that, from experience, some candidates will go on for 10 or 15 seconds, and that doesn't become fair to the rest. So. We will keep the questions and the answers to the time allotted. So we'll begin with the 2 minutes per candidate for the opening statements, and then when we get to the questions, we will rotate through the order. And each candidate that begins will have 1 minute. Every other candidate will have 1 minute, and then there will be an open 1 minute for all of the candidates to debate the questions. So we will begin with our first opening statement from Clive Doucette from the Green Party. And Mr. Doucette, you're on the clock.
I live in Grand-Etang. I moved there 3 years ago. My family is from there. Grew up, part of my childhood was there. And but most of my life was spent in in Cape Breton, Newfoundland, and Ottawa. So I've been around. My dad was a fisheries economist, and he was also vice president of DEVCO for a while. What brings me here, you're probably wondering. It's a long way from most of my life, where I've been a writer, a local politician, and a public servant. What's brought me here is climate change. In Ottawa, my career started in 1997 as city council with the ice storm. Biggest climate disaster until Katrina. $6.2 billion in claims. We shut down the city for 2 solid weeks. I learned a great deal about climate change in those 2 weeks. One of them was a city cannot function without electricity. You can't even run your sewage system. We came very close to shutting Montreal, Ottawa down completely and having literally refugees on the street. We very narrowly avoided that. Last year we had 6 tornadoes. It made Hurricane Dorian look like a baby case. Whole neighborhoods were wiped out. Now I'm living in Grand-Bretagne. My dream has come true. I'm quietly living there, heureux comme un chou, happy as a cabbage. But one of the things I didn't understand was the amount of climate change and what it's doing to Cape Breton. It's been astonishing.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. We've got winter winds like sweats, 5 times what we had as kids. We've got ocean erosion, extraordinary, and we've got land degradation like bogs everywhere. We need to have a strong Green caucus in Ottawa to tackle this like Tommy Douglas did back in the 50s when he brought in healthcare and social care. That's it for now.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. From the People's Party of Canada, Billy Joyce.
Hi everyone, bonsoir tout le monde. I'm proud to be here before you tonight representing the People's Party of Canada with 40,000 members strong and confirmed candidates in over 300 ridings across the country. We are the fastest growing political party in the history of Canada, possibly even the Western world. We appeal to everyday Canadians who are seeking nothing more than individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect in their daily lives. For too long, the federal government has imposed legislation to cripple the very fabric of Cape Breton-Canso, ultimately destroying our coal industry, our steel industry, our fishing industry, and our energy sector, creating a reliance on equalization payments and social benefits in the form of employment insurance, welfare, destroying our sense of integrity and self-sustenance. We import Chinese steel, we import Saudi Arabian oil, we import Chinese coal, and we allow foreign trawlers to fish our oceans. But neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives have done anything substantial to stop this trend. We are the only party serious about using Section 92.10 of the Constitution to run pipelines across the country in the interest of a national project, and we want to make Canada a net exporter of oil. The People's Party of Canada prioritizes the needs of our Canadians first. Seniors, armed forces, veterans, and our children should come before the United Nations and their member countries or other foreign interests. Our plan for increased economic immigrants, decreased unqualified immigrants,
30 seconds.
along with our flat tax proposal of 15% for those earning between $15,000 and $100,000, as well as our $15,000 tax exemption and the elimination of the capital gains tax, will go a long way to help support the economy. Some folks say that doing the same thing over and over and over again with the same players expecting different results is a form of insanity. Voting Liberal out of frustration against the Conservatives and vice versa is just that. Join in the common sense revolution, end the insanity, vote Billy Joyce for Cape Breton-Canso, Maxime Bernier as Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. From the Liberal Party, Mike Holloway.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here tonight for the debate for many reasons, many that are very close to my heart. First of all, for a riding this large and this diverse and this complex, it is vital to me that every region feels like they're being heard and that they're being valued. Most importantly, they must feel like they have a seat at the table, where all decisions that affect their lives, their businesses, and their community. Folks, on a deeper level, the Strait region has been home like me for several years, 11 in fact. I've worked at the Strait area campus 2 days a week for the past 11 years, and I have deep and important relationships with the people of this community. And I've seen firsthand the potential that exists in this area. One of the reasons I've chosen to run is to build on the incredible work of the people of this area and what they've done. And I want to make your concerns a priority in Ottawa. Now, for these reasons, it's a very special privilege for me to be here today, to hear your questions, to offer you my plans and my ideas. This election, folks, it comes down to a choice. It comes down to a choice on progress or looking back. And folks, I choose progress. Tonight you'll hear a lot about records. Well, here's a record of progress that I'd like to relay to you. The Liberal Party has created 1 million jobs. 800,000 people have been lifted out of poverty. 300,000 children have been lifted out of poverty. 11,250 families in this riding. We've had the
30
lowest
seconds.
unemployment in 40 years. We have free trade agreements with all G7 countries. And I believe that investing in people is how you grow the economy. When everyone else has a chance at success, everyone, we can move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Gilway. From the Conservative Party of Canada, Alfie McLeod.
Well, thank you very much, and it's wonderful to be engaged and here tonight with so many people with this election going on. This is a real opportunity for Cape Breton-Canso. For far too long, Cape Breton-Canso has been forgotten. All we are seeing is scraps from the government. The status quo is not working for this area. It has done no favors for us. We are not getting ahead. That means it's time to change. We need to be heard. We need a strong voice. So the question, of course, would be, why would you choose me? Well, I know Cape Breton-Canso. I was born and raised in Sydney River. I went to high school in St. Peter's. My first job was in Inverness. And I've lived the last 42 years in Gabrous Lake with my wife Shirley and our 3 children. And they were the reason that I got involved in politics to begin with. I have 6 new reasons. They're called grandchildren. And I want them to have the opportunity to stay in Cape Breton-Canso if that's what they want to do. My work history is almost as diverse as this riding. I spent 19 years working in DevCo. I worked underground. I worked in agriculture. I worked in safety. I worked in training. I worked as a firefighter. You name it, and I've done it. And these life experiences are what will make me a good representative for Cape Breton-Canso. I've learned a lot about living within my means.
30 seconds.
And that's what Canada needs. Then, of course, there's my political experience. I have 16 years as a member of the House of Assembly. I sat as the Speaker of the House. It gave me an opportunity to understand the bureaucracy and understand how the system works. And it also gave me a real opportunity to learn how to work with people from all sides of the political spectrum. The real value is the knowledge. I have the experience that you can trust.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod. And from the New Democratic Party, Lori Suter.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm actually not going to talk about myself, I'm going to talk about you. If successive Conservative and Liberal governments have gotten the answers right, then why is your life harder? Why is it harder to access healthcare, medicine, housing, employment? Why is homelessness increasing? Why are communities fighting independently to be heard on the environment, the use of rail, food security, specialized health care such as fertility care and cancer care? It's because politics has not been connected to the people, and that is what I intend to do. The NDP historically has been front and center in addressing the needs that matter to everyday Canadians. Only when people can meet their basic needs can they participate in a broader economy. Only then can they put their dollars back into their communities. If our vision as a country is not to help each other thrive, then what is it? The NDP have been the catalyst for the policies that matter most to Canadians, such as healthcare, but those policies are being eroded away and people are feeling the stress. They're working harder and are able to afford less. If we don't plan now for an economy that can be sustained without a dependence on finite energy, if we do not make governance decisions that meet the needs of people now and into the future, then we will experience hardship beyond what we are currently experiencing, and I see it every single day in
30
all
seconds.
sectors. The consequences to our decisions now have a lot at stake. We need to make governance decisions that are intelligent and compassionate, and that is the kind of governance that I intend to deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Suter. So we will move on to our scripted questions, and we'll do a rotating start following the order of our opening statements. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to answer each question. Then candidates will have a 1 minute open forum to debate each issue or question. Moderator decisions are final. regarding time, courtesy, tone of comments. We want you to debate, but we want respect from all candidates and from members of the audience. Our first question begins with Clive Doucette, and it is on the environment and natural resources. If elected, what would your government do to ensure clarity and certainty with respect to environmental regulations, including timely, efficient, and inclusive regulatory review and approval processes? You have 60 seconds, Mr. Doucette.
Well, I would start by asking the tough questions, a lot of which I don't really know the answer to, but I think we need to know the answer. I want to know why PEI's population is growing and Cape Breton's is declining. I want to know tough questions like, why is it okay to be calling moose in the park to protect the boreal forest, but clear-cutting the rest of the island? I'd like to know why it's okay to cull moose and not cull seals when they are destroying a species, the cod, which is on the verge of extinction. There are tough questions that need to be answered, asked of government, and they're simply not occurring. I want to know why Cape Breton got $200,000 in equalization payments when the province of Nova Scotia got $12 million.
15 seconds.
There are many tough questions that need to be asked. You're not going to get them asked by the good members to my left because they're part of the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Doucette. Mr. Joyce?
In our opinion, climate change alarmism is based on flawed models that have consistently failed at correctly predicting any kind of future. None of the cataclysmic predictions that have been made about the climate since the 1970s have actually come true. There was no new ice age, no steady warming in direct relation with increases in CO2 levels, no disappearance of polar ice caps, no exceptional rise in ocean levels, no abnormal increase in catastrophic weather events, and no widespread crop failure of any kind. People's Party of Canada government would withdraw from the Paris Accord because we simply feel that we can't reach those unrealistic greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. We feel that we should stop sending billions of dollars to developing countries to help them reduce their emissions.
15 seconds.
We actually want to bring pipelines into Atlantic Canada, and we want to abolish subsidies for green technology and let private players develop profitable and efficient alternatives. We need to invest in adaptation strategies if problems arise as a result of any natural climate change.
Thank you. Mr. Galloway?
Fundamentally, if you don't have a plan for the environment, you don't have a plan for the economy, and vice versa. So the Liberal Party has a plan for both the environment and the economy. If we look at clean energy, if we look at reducing pollution, creating jobs, it all is interconnected. If you look at the wastewater initiative that we will go forward with in Inverness, it focuses on those three pillars: creating jobs, cleaner energy, and better use of resources, focusing on community development.
Thank you. Alvin McLeod?
Thank you. One of the things we have to realize is that our natural resources are very important to making the economy work. We have to protect our environment because the environment is what is important to making sure that we as a community grow and move forward. At the same time, we make sure that the resources like the harbor we have here in Port Hawkesbury is maintained and looked after. We need to be sure that we are looking after in balance. What has happened, and I belong to a government that brought in the Sustainable Act so that we would balance making sure that indeed the environment was being looked after, and at the same time we are looking after the interests of making sure that people were able to have work. We do not need to tax, we need to have a plan that will make sure the environment is sustainable.
15 seconds. Thank you. Lori Suter?
I think everyone wants timely environmental processes and regulations, but we have to remember the purpose of them, which is to strike a balance between economic growth and environmental protection. And communities are struggling with ineffective processes, and proponents are struggling with ineffective processes. In 2013, BP Oil did a global study on what the reserves were for oil from the earth globally at present rates of extraction and consumption, and they estimated we have approximately 55 years left of oil, and about the same for gas, a little bit better for coal, about 188 years there. They assured us that they can tap into other oil reserves with new technologies. The problem is those technologies are extremely expensive, and the extraction involves things like fracking. That will price those things out of your pocketbook to access energy. If we don't shift now and get smart about it in our policies, we will pay a high cost later.
Thank you. We have 1 minute open forum for all 5 candidates to debate this question. The floor is yours, candidates.
I have with me, and you guys can come consult it after, it's a list of independent scientists. Right now, what we're relying on is the information coming from the International Panel on Climate Change. I have a list here of scientists that includes astrophysicists, climatologists, meteorologists, and in it, I have a list of dozens of scientists that argue that global warming is caused by natural process. Another list of scientists who argue that the cause of global warming is unknown. Another list that says that the International Panel on Climate Change is biased. Everything is derived from the United Nations. We don't need the United Nations telling Canadians how to govern their lives.
15 seconds.
And that is why People's Party of Canada government wants to withdraw from most of the United Nations accords. They are nothing but robbing the Western world to give to the 133 countries in the Middle East and Northern Africa.
Thank you. Our next question is on the topic of fiscal responsibility. How will your government ensure that Canada is fiscally responsible? We start with Billy Joyce from the People's Party of Canada.
Right now, our national debt is at $700 billion. Every day, we accumulate interest of $54 million. The hourly interest is at $2 million. The individual share of debt is at $18,000, and among G20 nations, we're 7th in debt to GDP ratio. And that's not 7th in the good sense, that's 7th in the worst sense. This is adding to the burden of future Canadians, and it seems nobody cares. My daughters and your children and future grandchildren will be on the hook for this, and all we hear from the other parties are promises to keep spending more and more and more on bureaucracy. None of the other parties believes in fiscal prudence anymore. In order to buy votes, they all make spending promises totaling tens of billions of dollars and propose tax measures that will only complicate Canada's tax system
15 seconds.
and make it less fair. We're proposing a flat tax system, a basic tax that will eliminate all kinds of bureaucracy and all kinds of spending within the government.
Thank you. Mike Callaway from the Liberal Party.
Thank you for the question. When I began speaking and I was giving my introductions, I spoke to the achievements that the Liberal Party of Canada have made across this country, but there's much, much more to do. But the only way you grow an economy, the only way you grow regions, the only way you grow communities is through investing in families, communities, and individuals. And when you think about tonight, think about the numbers that we put forward in terms of investment. We need to do more. We need to invest in Canadians. Or we can do everything humanly possible to balance the budget on the backs of middle-class families. I think there's a clear choice tonight.
Thank you. Alfie MacLeod from the Conservative Party.
Thank you. What we need to do is concentrate on how do we work with small business. And small business has been the backbone of this country since day one. It is there that we grow our economy. We have to repeal Trudeau's tax increases on small business investment. We need to allow small business people to be allowed to reinvest into their business and make some investments so that they are working with the private sector. We need to take government out of working in industries that they have no business in. If we want to be successful, we have to go back to relying on small businesses and on the people who work and make this country great.
Thank you. Laurie Suter, NDP.
Anyone who's run a household knows what fiscal responsibility is. It's not continually spending more than you are bringing in. And we have already maxed what we can ask people to contribute in terms of taxes. If we don't start talking about tax reform and taxing the people who can most afford to pay, and what the NDP is proposing is 1% after the first 20 million that people make, which is very reasonable. If we don't start drawing that as our source of revenue to invest back into Canadian services and the things that we need, then we're not going to be able to sustain this economy. We need to support ingenuity. We need to support future planning for an economy that is sustainable. We need to make sure that our source of revenue is coming from a place that we can manage.
15 seconds.
We can't keep taxing from people who can't afford to pay more. They pay on their income, they pay on their property, they pay at the pump, they pay everywhere. And it's getting harder and harder to maintain.
Thank you. Clive Doucette from the Green Party.
You know, people create jobs, not government. And what government's responsibility to do is to create a platform in which your communities can be vibrant and move forward. What's happened to our country that we are a rich nation? We have lots of $80 billion, I think is our annual budget. 15% of that is disposable. There's less community housing now than there was 40 years ago. There's no co-op housing, no assisted housing. Look at the roads. When I was a boy, the road in front of the Cabot Trail is exactly, in front of our house is exactly the way it is today, 50 years later. The edge of the road is so narrow that if your tires go up, basically we have people kill themselves quite frequently or drive off the road and seriously injured. There's been no investment in our island in 50 years of any significance. And when it does come, it's kind of crazy, like the heavy water plant. We need a new way of looking at things, a new way of governing our nation, and a new way of investing in this province.
Thank you. The 5 candidates have 1 minute total to debate this question.
Well, being no one wants to speak up, I'll just add that debts and deficits are nothing more than deferred taxes on our children and grandchildren. Instead of buying votes with borrowed money, a responsible government should cut spending, balance the budget as quickly as possible, and then lower taxes in a prudent manner to put money back into Canadians' pockets. I'm glad Alfie mentioned small and medium-sized businesses, because one of the things we want to do is stop these corporate handouts. There's no reason why a company like Loblaws, who profits $900 million in a year, gets $15 million for new fridges, when the local smaller businesses have to struggle to access any kind of funding or any kind of help in their startups.
Still 15 seconds for any of the candidates. Someone can go.
As a small business owner in the past, I know what it's like to be the manager, the chief bottle washer, making sure people get paid before you get paid. A couple of things I want to address very quickly. The small Canadian business tax rate did go from 11 to 9% rather, which is the lowest in the G7. So we may want to look at the facts tonight as opposed to hyperbole.
Thank you. Our next question is on competitive tax environment and investment. Canada's tax system is outdated, complex, inefficient, and it imposes significant compliance costs on taxpayers. So much so that the Canadian Chamber of Commerce has called for a royal commission to completely overhaul the tax system. How would your government increase Canada's competitiveness by reducing or simplifying the tax burden for businesses? And we start with the Liberal candidate, Mike Kellaway.
The premise of that question, I would say that we need to look at a collaboration with all 3 parties, all provinces, all municipalities in terms of looking at if indeed there are hot areas, touch points with respect to areas that require tax reform. If you look at the Liberal record, and the Liberal record when it comes to consulting municipalities, whether it is giving a $6 billion dollars of investment into the municipalities' hands in terms of looking at infrastructure, it's the same principle. It's the same principle in my community work or working with NSCC. You work collaboratively together to make good things happen and to review them and make sure that everyone's voice is heard in that process.
Thank you. Alfie McLeod.
Thank you. We will repeal the Trudeau's tax increases on small business investments. We'd exempt spouses from the tax system and the business dividends. We would reduce federal regulations because that's what's hurting small business. Federal regulations need to be reduced by at least 25%. And we would implement a 2-for-1 deal. So every time that you wanted to introduce a new tax measure, implement a new regulation, 2 would have to be taken out. Anytime that we're looking at putting in a piece of legislation, there is no such thing as a perfect piece of legislation. So we need to put in each piece of legislation a package that says we will have a sunset clause so that indeed they...
15 seconds. Please speak into your microphone, Mr. McLeod.
Sorry. We will make sure that there is a sunset clause so that we will review every piece of legislation to make sure it's doing what it should do and it is working with small business to make it happen and easier for them to invest back into their communities as they do so well.
Thank you. Laurie Suter of the NDP.
The purpose of taxation is twofold. One is to redistribute wealth back into the community, so to pay for services like healthcare, like pharmacare, like dental care, like eye care. The second purpose is to stimulate business and economic growth. We're not doing well on either, and we currently don't have any system that is evaluating why the system isn't working and how we can do it better. We absolutely need to sit down collaboratively and figure out how we make these things work. We're living in a complicated world trade environment. We have difficulties with trade. We have a constantly moving economic target with worldwide leadership. So we have to be looking at those things, but we also have to be looking at redistribution of wealth. This is a
15
very wealthy country. We have a lot of resources. There's no reason why we can't be distributing it in such a way that people's needs are met every day in a basic way.
Thank you. Clive Doucette of the Green Party.
It's not just how you tax people, it's how you spend money. And most countries where people are feeling they're getting their value for the money, there's less fretting about the taxes. But the taxes are not being collected fairly. We are offshoring of billions and billions of dollars from corporations. That we can fix that, but the government has never showed any real appetite for doing that. So there's the wealthiest, the 1% in this country are basically not paying their fair share. We need to change that. But we're not going to change that with the present way of shuttling between the two old parties. We need a new voice in government, just like healthcare in Tommy Douglas's day needed a new caucus to put pressure on Mike Pearson to bring in healthcare and other stuff. We need our leader, the Tommy Douglas of today, Elizabeth May, to have a caucus that can bring in a new way of spending money. And then when we're spending money properly, and your kids have pharmacare and they don't have to pay to go to university and so forth, you're not coming out with debt, and there's a place to rent or buy down the street that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, maybe people will fret a little bit less about the taxes they're paying because of less costs.
Thank you. Billy Joyce of the People's Party of Canada.
People's Party of Canada government would actually abolish the capital gains tax over the first mandate. We want to reduce the corporate income tax from 15% to 10%. According to the latest OECD figures, Canada's combined federal provincial corporate income tax rate is 12th highest amongst the 36 OECD countries. A more competitive tax rate would ensure that Canadian businesses become more profitable, pay higher salaries, and invest more. We want to gradually reduce over the course of one mandate the corporate income tax, and also gradually abolish the personal capital gains tax. Many of our trading partners do not tax capital gains. There was no capital gain tax in Canada until 1972, and abolishing it would encourage every Canadian to save and invest more, and would give entrepreneurs access to a larger pool of capital. The benefits to our economy would vastly exceed the loss of government revenues. We should stop taking billions of dollars from the private sector and redistributing them through subsidies. When I hear things like redistribution of wealth, I think of communist China, not Canada.
Thank you. Candidates have 1 minute to debate or rebut anything that they heard from the other candidates. 60 seconds.
Well, one of the things that we would do is we would cancel the $1.5 billion in corporate welfare and redirect it back to Canadians. We'd scrap the carbon tax, and we would remove the GST off of home heating bills and home energy costs. These are things that will make it easier for people to live here in Canada.
40 seconds remaining.
Okay, thank you very much. A couple of things. When we look at ensuring multinational tech giants pay the corporate taxes on revenue generated in Canada, we're going to go after those folks. We're going to also go after the IT companies that do business here in Canada, and we're also going to ensure that they pay their fair taxes. I'll say this about Tommy Douglas. Clive has mentioned him several times. I'm sure Tommy Douglas will be rolling around in his grave realizing that someone is mentioning about the fact that government should have an active role in the lives of people here in Canada.
Thank you. Our next question is on workforce attraction and retention. Labor attraction continues to be the biggest challenge for businesses in rural Cape Breton-Canso. How does your party plan to encourage greater diversity and participation in the workforce, including opportunities for Indigenous peoples, women, LGBTQ2, youth, seniors, and other marginalized populations? We begin with Alfie McLeod.
Well, one of the first things we would do is we would make sure that the tax structure is easier so that when people come here to live and work, that they can actually afford to stay here. We would open up making sure that when we were looking for people to immigrate into our provinces and our country, that we look at a way of doing it, that they meet the job needs that are there. We would work hard working with the people in the industry to find out who it is they need, what it is they need, and how do we make the jobs that they require are able to be filled using the systems that are in place in reducing taxes.
Thank you. Lori Suter?
People are looking for compassion, and they are looking for communities that are strong, vibrant, and healthy, and where they can obtain services. They're wanting to stay in places where their spouses can advance their careers. We have lost professionals because those things were not available. They need to access childcare. They need acceptance within the communities and places where they can call home. They are looking for a place where they can use their professional talents and their education, and we are well poised here to be part of the new economy. We have such untapped potential on so many fronts, and we could be developing that by encouraging the acceptance and diversity of everyone who is present in our communities. There is a difference
15
between
seconds.
supporting and empowering constituents in Canada and interfering in their lives. Those are two very different things. And supporting and empowering everyone to their full potential and having education that responds to future needs and not just to current employer needs
Thank
is a
you.
critical piece.
Claude Doucette.
You know, in Shinnecock and down the town where I live, we sponsored several refugee families and managed to keep one Syrian family. That is it. Everyone else has left. Cape Breton has a real problem with diversity, real problem attracting people. I think there's solutions, but we have to make those solutions not only clear to the new people coming in, but to our own folks. We need to have success stories here that are based on a new economy and a new way of doing business. Visited Appleseed today, solar panels. They're in Arsha, and they're producing, they're employing 8 people with good benefits, and they're working full out. That's just a small little project, but it's one we can extend that across the province. We have to find a way to get back our small farmlands.
15 seconds.
We have to have a program that can actually encourage young people to come here and start farms. For example, lots of people in the third world would like to do that. Lots of native Canadians would like to do that, but we haven't allowed that to happen.
Thank you. Billy Joyce.
Right now, we have 330,000 either permanent immigrants coming into the country or refugees. We also have 79,000 temporary foreign workers, 224,000 international mobility immigrants, and 317,000 student visas. I've had discussions over the last 2 weeks with some Hindu students that were here on either work visas or student visas, and although they want to contribute largely to our economy and integrate into our society, they will probably be forced to leave. So on top of reducing the corporate income tax to 10% and thus allowing businesses to recruit more employees, and on top of reducing personal income tax to 15% and 25% as flat rates, what we'd like to do is
15
reduce
seconds.
the number of immigrants that come in that are unqualified and increase the number of immigrants that are qualified to take the jobs that are available in our communities or to start businesses.
Thank you. Mike Galloway.
I love this question. Diversity brings jobs. Diversity creates new businesses. We may be looking at a tale of two Cape Breton-Cansos here, but when I look into the communities that I serve, and they're all throughout this riding, I can tell you 10, 15 examples where people have come here. They've come to university here. They have started businesses here. They're working in local businesses here. We need to continuously invest in those people, and we need to invest in pre-apprenticeship programs, apprenticeship programs, like we're doing. At the beginning of this discussion, at the beginning of this night, I talked about the importance of investing in Canadians. And when you do invest in Canadians and communities, good things will happen. I've seen it firsthand in the work that I've done at
15 seconds.
NCC and the community groups that I started in this region that are pulling together in Cape Breton-Canso to do good things to better this riding. We need to continue that path.
Thank you. We now have 1 minute open debate. Again, we're looking for debate. You don't have to wait for me to call on you. You can just start speaking. You have 60 seconds.
Just a note on the immigration. Nova Scotia is well behind the Canadian average. The Canadian average is about 21.8%, and we are at about 6.1%. Most of the economic immigrants to Canada have a bachelor degree or higher, but they tend not to stay in areas where there's high outmigration or economic difficulty because they can't get jobs in their field. So they may be here for a short period of time, but they will leave, leaving their skills, their ingenuity, everything that they could contribute to communities for other areas. We're not being open to that. We're not supporting them. We're not making sure that they have the opportunities that they need. If the services aren't here, they're not going to stay. The majority of people immigrating to this country are from
15
China,
seconds.
India, and the Philippines. So I think some of the misconceptions that have been put forward need to be corrected.
Thank you. Our next question is on the environment and natural resources. How will your party balance the need to address climate change while supporting the region's economic stability? As examples, industrial development and energy security. We start with Lori Suter.
This is going to be the key question of the future. And when we see young people marching in the streets on climate change, it's because they feel tremendous uncertainty, not just about their environmental future, but about their economic future. This is a very delicate web that we have continually interfered with by treating resources only in their value for profit and not recognizing that we can't buy drinkable water and we can't buy breathable air. By 2025, it's estimated that 1.8 billion people in this world will be living in absolute water scarcity. Only 6 countries in the world provide the freshwater resources to the extent that they can provide for their own needs. And we are rapidly depleting those.
15 seconds.
So we absolutely have to find a balance. Without the environmental web surviving, we don't have an economy.
Thank you. Clive Doucette.
You know, I hate this question because what it always says is you have a choice here. You can go with jobs and keep on extracting all the resources you can, as fast as you can, get the money out as fast as you can, or protect the environment. That is not the paradigm. The paradigm is how do you continue creating new jobs in new ways that doesn't deplete the environment. And we in Cape Breton have never been very good at that. We can be. We are a great place to live. We have wonderful people. We've got probably one of the most beautiful pieces of real estate on the planet. But somehow what we've done is we've got this notion in our head that it's jobs versus the environment. Look around the world. Why are the people of British Columbia fighting the pipeline like crazy?
15
They're
seconds.
fighting the pipeline like crazy because they know their beautiful environment is the key to their job environment. And we need to have the same mental state here in our island.
Thank you. Billy Joyce.
I don't know if everyone forgets that carbon dioxide is actually beneficial for agriculture, and there's recently been a measurable greening of the world, in part thanks to higher levels of carbon dioxide. Despite what global warming propaganda claims, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. In fact, water vapor is more of an insulator than carbon dioxide. Are we going to look to eliminate clouds? What we want to do is prioritize implementing practical solutions to make Canada's air, water, and soil cleaner, bringing clean drinking water to remote First Nations communities. For example, if we're really concerned about the rising tides of sea levels, why aren't we looking at desalinization projects for the ocean, where you take the water out of the ocean, remove the salt from it, and provide drinking water to places that need them? So we're looking at practical steps to clean up our environment, clean up our rivers, clean up our lakes, clean up our beaches, not impose some carbon tax or eliminate the straws or eliminate cattle because of flatulence.
Thank you. Mike Kellaway.
It's a hard one to follow up, but I'm going to give it a shot. 3 things. We would cut in half the corporate taxes for companies that develop technologies or manufacture products that have 0 emissions. $500 million we'll invest in terms of the TMX pipeline will be reinvested in energy projects. And a $5 billion clean power fund that will focus on electrification of industries, including resource and manufacturing sectors. I want to say just a couple of things. There are so many groups in Cape Breton-Canso that are focusing on environmental change, and interconnecting that to the community. I keep on hearing that Cape Breton-Canso is not doing this. I keep on hearing Cape Breton-Canso is not doing that. When you're involved in the community like I am, you see the leaders in this community, from Pomket to Dominion, from Glace Bay to Canso.
Thank you. Alfie McLeod.
Natural resources are what built this very island in this province. And one of the things we need to look at is where we're going to move and how we're going to move forward. First thing we need to do is scrap the carbon tax and use technology to move the environment forward. One of an example of that would be putting together a national energy corridor, which would carry our Canadian energy and resources from coast to coast. You know, it would minimize environmental impacts, it would lower the cost of doing environmental assessments without sacrificing quality, and at the same time, it would increase certainty for the investors, because we need to have investors to make our economy stronger. And we would get critical projects built, and all along with that, they would create good paying jobs.
Thank you. 1 minute open debate.
What I find ironic about Mr. McLeod's comment on the energy corridor is that both the Liberals and the Conservatives have had 50 years to use Section 92.10 of the Constitution to run the pipelines across the country, and none of them have So while our workers and our fathers and our mothers of families are going out west to work in Fort McMurray or wherever else, we claim that we don't want tankers exporting our oil, but we've got Saudi Arabian tankers coming in with their oil, and we want to bring pipelines to Atlantic Canada so that our fathers and our mothers can remain with their kids and find employment locally.
25 seconds left.
When we were building this country originally, we built a national rail line from coast to coast. An energy corridor from coast to coast will help unify this country and at the
15
same time
seconds.
put people to work.
Yes. 10 seconds.
Just to put under the category of facts tonight, Nova Scotia already has a carbon tax.
Thank you. Our next question is on entrepreneurship and small business. Small and medium entrepreneurs account for 99.7% of all businesses and 71% of all private sector jobs in Canada. But small businesses continue to struggle with everything from taxation to regulation to labor attraction. How will your government support new entrepreneurs and small businesses in this region? For this question, we go back to the beginning to Clive Doucette.
My daughter has a business called Grassroots Design, and she designs and builds kitchens. Very successful, 3 crews working for her. One of the things she complains about constantly is the amount of tiny little rules that she has to obey, which we can fix. These are fairly easy fixes. But you know what? They've been around for a long time and they haven't happened. I ask you to consider why they haven't happened.
Thank you. Billy Joyce.
One of the issues that we've been hearing a lot of is equalization payments. And equalization payments encourage recipient provinces to maintain large public sectors, keep taxes high, and intervene more in their economies, which drives out investment and lowers employment and productivity. What we want to do is establish a parliamentary committee to review and make recommendations on a new formula that will avoid the welfare trap and provide poorer provinces with the right incentives to adopt pro-growth economic policies and reduce their dependence on federal money. Small and medium-sized businesses will benefit from our corporate tax being reduced to 10%, and they will also benefit from the capital gains tax being reduced to 0 from 50% over the course of our first mandate. It is important to help small and medium-sized businesses. That's why we're going to put an end to the big corporate handouts that are given to companies like Loblaws or Irving or other huge conglomerates that have quasi-monopolies on their respective industries.
Thank you. Mike Kellaway.
A couple of points. We're going to be looking at funding up to 2,000 entrepreneurs, as much as 50,000 to launch their business. That's a tangible item, folks. We'll cut the cost of federal incorporation by 75%, which is key. I can tell you in my time when I was a business owner, those 2 fundamental pillars would be absolutely important at the time for me in moving forward.
Thank you. Alfie McLeod.
In the last 4 years, carbon tax has raised the price of gasoline and heating, and it's made it harder for small business owners to compete. The payroll tax hikes hurt the bottom line, and under the previous government, tax hikes have been increased on small businesses in 2017, ended up costing small business even more. The regulatory burden, 4,300 new federal regulations since 2015 have been put in place to make it harder for small businesses to grow and do their business. We need to get back away from that. As I said earlier, if we're going to have new regulations, 2 have to go out and 1 has to come in. We need to realize that it's small business that drives this country, not government.
Thank you. Lori Suter.
Where there are no jobs, people create small businesses to have employment, but they need more than help to launch. They need help to survive. And when you look at what small businesses need to survive, they need a population base so that they have someone that they can provide their services to. A lot of businesses open, but they close within the first year to 5 years. And that's because they are not able to thrive. They're also overwhelmed and defeated by paperwork, by what they can't afford to hire people to help them wade through the myriad of paperwork and taxation measures that they have to somehow get through. And those things are very onerous for small businesses that are starting out. They also need support to know what programs are out there and how to access them in a timely manner.
15 seconds.
If we don't support small business with these simple small changes, and if small businesses aren't able to thrive, our economy, particularly here in Cape Breton-Canso, will not be able to survive.
Thank you. We have 1 minute for any follow-up or rebuttals.
Small business people tell me that they spend at least 1 day a week doing regulations, filling in forms, and doing everything for government. There was a mayor in Mississauga, Hazel McCollum, She had somebody that when you wanted to open a small business, you went to that person in her government. That person did all the red tape, went through all the forms and everything that you needed to do, so that you weren't spending a whole lot of time working on paperwork. You were actually building your business. And that's the kind of thing we need to do. We need a minister that's responsible right to the Prime Minister reporting on red tape. We need someone who cares about where we're going, and we have to reduce taxes. Again, I'll say it. Small business is what made this country great. Small business is what's going to make this country survive.
15 seconds.
I find it interesting that Mr. McLeod mentions the carbon tax, because the carbon tax, again, is a derivative of the different accords we have with the United Nations, which is the Paris Accord. And Andrew Scheer actually whipped his caucus into voting in favor of the Paris Accord. So I'm not exactly sure how Mr. McLeod is going to do anything when Mr. Scheer is imposing this on his caucus.
Thank you. Next question is on trade enabling infrastructure. If elected, what would your government do to support trade enabling improvements to infrastructure projects, such as broadband, cellular roads, etc., in the riding of Cape Breton-Canso? We start with Billy Joyce.
One part of our platform is actually looking at the CRTC and changing the way that they do business so that we can open up more competition in the cell service. Like right now, for example, we've only got TELUS and I believe Bell in the area. There aren't too many cell providers. The other thing that we want to do is eliminate this notion that federal government can interfere in provincial matters. When we look at the Constitution of Canada, it's supposed to be law, and in that Constitution it outlines what provincial matters are supposed to be versus federal matters. Infrastructure is one of those matters, especially when it comes to transportation or even healthcare or even education for that matter. So a People's Party of Canada wants to respect the Constitution as it's written, and we want to take away barriers that exist for small and medium-sized businesses to thrive.
10 seconds.
We want to eliminate the monopoly that a lot of these telecommunications industries have on cell service and communications.
Thank you. Mike Hilloway.
Thank you for the question. A national infrastructure fund that focuses on nation-building projects that are built on the strengths of the regions and the opportunities of the regions. We look back in the 50s and 60s with the Canada was on the move with the St. Lawrence Seaway. We were looking at different projects. We dreamed big. We were bold. We looked at how we could grow our region's economy. I look at this riding, one of the greatest strengths is tourism. If we mirror up the National Infrastructure Fund with a new tourism infrastructure fund, which we have in our platform, there's no better place in Canada to pilot that than here.
Thank you. Alfie McLeod.
Well, one of the things I think that we need to do as a federal government is look at what we already own. What does this country already own? In this country, we own things like Grassy Hill. We own things like the canal in St. Peters. We own things like Marconi in Glace Bay. We need to take what we have control over and put our resources into that. We don't have to wait for a long time. We need to partner with private business. We need to partner with people that know how to run business and get government away from it. We need to do things like bring a couple of icebreakers into Sydney where the Coast Guard College is. I mean, we train our people in Sydney, but we don't have any Coast Guard ships in Sydney, so maybe that would put a difference. We have a harbor here that's second to none in the world. We should have Coast Guard ships working out of here because they're not going to be worried about how they get in and out of
15 seconds.
We need the energy corridor. I said it before. When we had trouble in this country, we built it by you building a railroad from one coast to the other. We built a highway from one coast to the other. And now we need to build an energy corridor from one coast to the other.
Thank you. Lori Suter.
Federal government has a role to play in supporting infrastructure that will support trade, support getting goods to market, provide export passages, but only if it's consistent with the vision that communities have for themselves. And if they do have a vision, they need ready and fast access to make those dreams happen and to make the capacity that they perceive for their communities be realized. We also, I think, need to cooperate with each other as communities on a broader vision within this constituency. Look at expanding overseas markets. Look at getting our goods to those overseas markets and provide support to businesses to access them and access that trade. Also develop greater accessibility to secondary market products.
15 seconds.
As well as considering expanding access to web-based marketing. All of these are going to be the path of the future.
Thank you. Clive Doucette.
I find the Liberals campaign with a lot of dreams and government a little differently. We need to have really simple things happen before we start to dream really big. And one of the things, simple things that need to happen is we need drop-dead, high-speed, broadband internet across rural Canada. And that's one of the policies the Green Party has, and we're happy to see that, au fur et à mesure, little by little, the Liberals are adopting Green Party policies, just as Mike Pearson adopted Tommy Douglas' policies. Another one of those policies is the national infrastructure problem, so I'm delighted to hear my colleagues saying we're going to advance that. But one of the things to make it advance, we got to have a Green caucus in Parliament that can hold their feet to the fire. We don't need to be government, we don't need to be the official opposition, but we need one old lady, 65 years old, Elizabeth May, to have some help. And that's why I'm here in front of you. I'm not here for to improve my review or my resume or even for anything else, but to serve this island well and to bring about a different way of governing in this country.
Thank you. 1 minute.
Well, this riding is more than just this island. There's also Canso and Pumpket in it as well. Canso, Pumpket in those areas. One of the things I find astonishing is that we have free trade between countries, but we don't have free trade amongst our provinces. And one of the things the People's Party of Canada wants to do is make sure that provinces are able to carry out trade amongst the provinces. Right now, you have certain breweries, for example, that can't export their products to other provinces. So we got businesses setting up shop in China, but we're not able to sell beer in British Columbia. I find that a little odd.
20 seconds. Any follow-up? Move on to our next question on the topic of regulatory reform. Regulatory misalignment between the provinces and territories and between the provincial, territorial, and federal governments impacts nearly all aspects of how business is conducted in Canada. If elected, how would your government improve regulation to ensure the unrestricted movement of goods and people across Canada? We start with Mike Kellaway.
Again, the fundamental building blocks, whether you're in education or small business or in government or not-for-profit, is again bringing the stakeholders together. People might say, well, that's just pie in the sky stuff. That's not an answer. But when I have an issue, a challenge, a problem, whether it's micro or macro, we bring people into the table. We bring all stakeholders to the table. That includes First Nations as well, and to discuss where the reforms need to be made on any regulatory issue or challenge, for that matter. But I do think tonight we've heard two tales of government. For the first part of the night, it was about 80 minutes. Government could do no wrong. Right? And now we're talking about where does government play a role. I think on my left or on my right, we need to pick and choose what do we want government to be, what do we want government to do, and I suggest we want good government.
Thank you. Alfie McLeod.
That would be novel. What we want is for the people of this province and this country to have more say in where we're going as a nation. If we're going to move forward, we need to allow the people to help make the decisions. The expertise is not in the politicians. The expertise is in the business community, and it's in the people that have made this country strong to now. So yes, we do have to consult with them, but it's not just about consulting. It's actually about listening.
Thank you. Lori Suter.
Currently, we have three key venues that are dealing with regulatory reform. The Canada-US Regulatory Cooperation Council, the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, and the Canadian Free Trade Agreement Regulatory Reconciliation Cooperation Table. In 2018, this sitting Liberal government held a national consultation on what people wanted, what Canadians wanted in terms of regulatory reform. And they were very clear in their answer, but nothing has been done. They said we want advance notice on changes or new regulations that are coming in so that we know what they are, we can have a participatory process in commenting on them and having a real voice in whether or not they are accurate for us. We want service standards for regulatory compliance to address timelines. In other words, make sure that we can address them in a timely manner. They want information that allows the ones that are going to be affected to comply with what will be required under regulations. And they also wanted cost-benefit analysis on regulatory reform. Is it really going to be cost-effective?
Clive Doucette.
You know, I think it's a great idea to bring all stakeholders together. Wonderful thing. I do it all the time when I was a city councillor, and I will do it when I'm a member of parliament. But you know what? All stakeholders are not born the same. There's a little difference between big pharma, big developers, big banks, and you and I. And if you want to bring them together, good luck. What you have to do is actually be tough as nails in the public venue and expose what's going on. The big guys are very good at taking government regulations and twisting them to their advantage. Why have we pushed out all the small saw mills in Cape Breton? Why have we done that? We've done it because the big corporations have used health and safety rules, the government's own health and safety, against themselves, against ourselves, to get what they want. We need to expose that, and your Green Caucus will do that if you give them the chance. This is your chance.
Thank you. Billy Joyce.
People's Party of Canada would appoint a Minister of Internal Trade whose sole responsibility would be to conduct studies, raise public awareness, counteract the influence of special interests that benefit from interprovincial barriers, and put pressure on provincial governments to get rid of them as well. We also want to prioritize relations with our main trading and defense partner, which is the United States of America, whom it seems all the leaders right now are taking exception to. Whether you like the president or not, they are our greatest trading partner. We also want to counter the anti-oil and anti-pipeline propaganda from radical environmentalists. We want to repeal Bill C-48, repeal Bill C-69, approve pipelines projects using a streamlined process, and find a private buyer for Trans Mountain Pipeline. My experience in economic development allows me to work with all three levels of government to find a way to find solutions and find economic initiatives in the area through SWOT analysis, for example, and I pledge to meet the community 6 times a year at the very least.
Thank you. The floor is open for 1 minute.
You know, governing and being on the dissenting side is not easy. You are basically in the news a lot saying things that people don't like, that are uncomfortable. I did that for 13 years in Ottawa, and I was probably, I was voted the greenest councillor in Canada, 2004, Man of the Year in 2010, and it was voted that because people had confidence that I wasn't bullshitting them. I was telling them the honest-to-God truth as I saw it, and most of the time, I was right. And as your Member of Parliament, I will deliver the same kind of honesty and the same kind of power to my chance at the public podium. And that's my big job. When I'm in that public podium, like right now,
15 seconds.
I'm all alone. But you can be concerned when I'm all alone, I will not back down.
Thank you. On to the topic of affordable housing. Affordable housing continues to be a challenge in our largely rural districts. What supports would your government provide to increase the quality and availability of housing stock in Cape Breton-Canso? We start with Alfie McLeod.
There's no question that there's a real challenge with affordable housing. There is a national housing strategy, and in that strategy, there's dollars that are put forward to help make life better. But what we need to do, and I've said this to Andrew Scheer, we can't use a cookie-cutter approach. What we need to do in Cape Breton-Canso and what we need to do in the land of Canada is much different than other parts of the country. We need to make sure that we make housing more affordable. There's a project in Petit de Gras right now that allows 2-bedroom apartments that are all ground level, easy access, easy to get into and out of for about $850. We need something like that here in Port Oxford. What do we need in other parts of the ride? We have a green credit program that we're looking at giving to Atlantic Canadians and Nova Scotians and Canadians in general, so that you can upgrade your house and make it cheaper to live in. We need to take the home heating costs off of the GST, off of the home heating costs. There are many things that we need to do, but biggest thing we need to do is work with the private industry because they know how to do things cost effective.
Thank you. Lori Suter.
Let's get down to the basics. The home incentive program that's currently available is intended to help new home buyers get into home ownership. It's complicated, and it's based on a repayment plan that makes it very difficult for people to utilize. The National Homelessness Strategy enables communities to examine their needs, but it's not clear that it enables them to address their needs. In Cape Breton-Canso, 10% of homeowners and 30% of renters are paying, it's estimated, in excess of the 30% threshold before they sacrifice basic needs like medicine and food to pay for housing. And I would suggest those numbers are higher because in every piece of my work, I cannot find housing for people who need it. I don't mean it's hard to find, I can't find it. We have people who are homeless because we cannot find housing. We need more affordable housing units built, available, and I don't mean nonprofit, affordable housing that is beyond the range of someone working minimum wage
Thank
or
you.
on social assistance.
Thank you. Clive Doucette.
You know, the government, federal and provincial governments, especially the federal government, have been downloading costs on provinces and municipalities for 20 years. And they've come from two governments, conservative and liberal. That's what's happened. And they balanced their budgets and they spent money in their favorite projects. But basically, when they withdrew from housing, cooperative housing, assisted housing, when they withdrew from transit funding, they crippled municipalities. 50% of your tax dollars, of the nation's tax dollars, go to the federal government. 8% go to your municipalities, which are on the front line of delivering housing and all those services we need every day. 8%. You cannot deliver new stuff. The second, when the federal government withdrew from that, our transit, our housing collapsed across Canada, and we saw in every town, village, and city homeless people on the street. Don't come to me and tell me they need to be there. They weren't there when I was a teenager. They weren't there when I was a young man. And they don't need to be there when our kids are there. But we need a different kind of government with different kind of ideals and different kind of funding.
Thank you. Billy Joyce.
Again, housing is supposed to be a provincial matter according to the Constitution. But if the People's Party of Canada doesn't form government, I am confident that I can work with all levels of government to make sure that the access to the programs of the National Housing Strategy are accessed. And we will work with the local developers to make sure that some of the barriers that exist and regulations that exist are removed. Right now, some of those private developers that Alfie mentioned in Penetagras or elsewhere are forced to pay $40,000 before a shovel even hits the ground. Our Canada First policies of taking care of seniors, veterans, First Nations, children, and armed forces, rather than sending tens of billions of dollars around the world for this, that, or the other thing, will also go a long way into helping anyone afford housing.
Thank you. Mike Kellaway.
As someone who's been knocking on doors personally across this riding, obviously this is a very, very important issue to me as someone who works in social justice and social innovation. But I want to, again, do something tonight and talk a little bit about facts. And I want to say that we always need to do better, by the way. But 1 million Canadians in the past 4 years have been able to find homes as a result of our Affordable Housing Act. Is it great? Yes. Do we need to do a lot more in our own community and across the country? Absolutely. And we plan on investing $55 billion into affordable housing over the next 10 years to build or retrofit 100,000 homes. These are key pieces.
15 seconds.
Do we need to do more? Yes. But those key pieces that I just mentioned are tangible, real, and will make happen, and we'll do more.
The Liberals certainly came out and committed money to affordable housing after the NDP committed a substantial amount of money to affordable housing. And not only to affordable housing, not only $5 billion to affordable housing, but also to the services that people can currently need who are struggling with homelessness. So having access to mental health care in a timely manner, having access to pharmacare, being able to provide services for their children so they can afford the housing that they are in. This is all part of correcting the issue of homelessness in this constituency, and it's very real.
We have 30 seconds.
I think it's important to note that anybody in elected office, when there's projects like poverty or there's people that don't have work, that is not a domain of one particular level of government. Anyone that's elected is responsible for all the people that they represent, regardless of what government says, this is in my ballywhack or that is in my ballywhack. That's a term that I won't use in front of you. The reality is, we are responsible for everything.
Thank you. Our final prepared question by the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce is on the topic of leadership. And the question is, why is your leader the best choice to be Prime Minister of Canada? We start with Laurie Souter.
You know, it's been really interesting for me personally following this election, and I'm sure for you too, because what emerged over time was that we saw a leader in Jagmeet Singh who was, first of all, fearless, willing to be courageous in his decision-making and his policies, but over time taught us what is fundamentally Canadian, which was to stop seeing the differences and to start hearing his intelligence and his compassion for Canadians and his understanding for Canadians and his commitment to Canadians. I have no doubt in his ability to be a very insightful leader for this country in very complicated times. And it's also been interesting to me in watching it that we have seen
15
leaders
seconds.
of other parties who are articulating points of view that I don't recognize as the Canada that I believe in. I'm very proud to be part of the party that Jagmeet Singh is leading.
Thank you. Clive Doucette.
You know, Elizabeth May has been fighting the climate change and for a fairer Canada since she was 17. I've known her since almost as long. She's been voted the best orator, the best researcher, the best MP in the country. She's been the longest there. There's no way others can compare to her. I mean, Jagmeet, bless his soul, been there for 12 months. Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Scheer, how long has he been there? And what's he done? Our leader has earned your confidence to lead a caucus of value in our parliament. She has been on the front lines for her whole life, and she's not made a real misstep with very little to help her. This is our chance to help her. I want you not to say to me, you have 4 years to think about it and vote Green the next time. I want you to think about it this time and support Elizabeth May now.
Thank you. Billy Joyce.
Mr. Doucette, you must have missed the speech where Elizabeth May, in a drunken stupor, indicated that Omar Khadr had more class than all of cabinet. Maxime Bernier has been a lawyer. Maxime Bernier has been Minister of Industry. Maxime Bernier came out with a platform months ago that over the last 2 weeks has been hijacked by both the Liberals and the Conservatives. The Liberals took this $15,000 flat tax. Since we came out with this brochure, Andrew Scheer has come out and talked about removing corporate subsidies, but not all of them, because some of them are still important. He's come out recently and talked about wanting to look at the fisheries. I'm not sure what the Liberals and the Conservatives have done over the last 100 years to do anything about the pipelines. We had this in our platform all along. So when Maxime Bernier left the Conservatives by indicating that they were politically and intellectually corrupt, it's that kind of thing that he means. If they can't come up with their own ideas and they have to rob from Maxime Bernier's ideas, what does that say about the leadership?
Thank you. Mike Kellaway.
I think the question was about leadership. I've taught leadership. My master's is in leadership. What you don't look from leaders is perfection. You may get that with Elizabeth May. With my leader, you have a leader that has grown in the position. You have a leader that cares about families, communities, others. You put others ahead of yourself. That's what leadership does. You have courage. You make decisions that are tough, that are hard to make, but you do with the best interest and the best heart. That's leadership.
Thank you. Alfie McLeod.
Leadership comes in many shapes and sizes. Andrew Scheer grew up in a very simple home. He didn't even have a car when they grew up. He was underestimated every time. When he ran for office the first time, they said it would never happen. He was going to move an icon out of the NDP party. When he ran for the Speaker of the House of this in Ottawa, he defeated all odds and became the Speaker. And if anyone knows the role of the Speaker, you know that you have to have leadership. You know that you have to be able to work with people from all different parties, especially as the Speaker of the House. And then he's moved on and he got into a race where they said, no, he doesn't have a chance because there's 14 people running for the leadership of the party, and he won. The other thing that he has done is he's went around and he's listened to people. And when he spoke to me about being a member of his team, the question was, I said, you don't want me if you're looking for a yes man, and he took me anyway.
1 minute open floor.
Just a comment on how Andrew Scheer became leader of the Conservative Party. Maxime Bernier won the first 12 ballots of that nomination meeting. Deloitte & Touche was kicked out after the 13th ballot. The recount was done once by the party brass. It was less than 1%, and the ballots were destroyed before there was an opportunity to recount properly. As far as Maxime Bernier's leadership, when he came out and criticized what we call radical multiculturalism, and Dr. Salim Mansour, a professor of political science at Western University, has stated that globalism and radical Islam are the two biggest threats to Canada. Well, when Maxime Bernier criticized that, Andrew Scheer and the rest of the party brass criticized him and tried to censor him. The People's Party of Canada is the only party up here defending the freedom of expression. When freedom of expression disappears, everything else disappears shortly thereafter.
Thank you. We're moving on to our questions submitted in advance by members of the public. We'll follow the same format as above. So each candidate will have 1 minute, then there will be a 1 minute open floor for rebuttal and follow-up. Question number 1, submitted by Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, the mayor of the town of Port Hawkesbury and a small business owner in the town. Her question is on small business. Will your party support the concept of a living wage higher than the current minimum wage? If so, how should the federal government assist small and medium-sized businesses with this transition? And we go back to the start with Clive Doucette.
I think we support a better wage for people. One of the ways you defeat poverty, you earn more. But you also have to make sure that on the other side of the coin, the folks paying those bills, like my daughter, she has to make a very large budget every payroll, every week. You got to make sure that they have adequate resources to do it. So you want to introduce it over time and in a manner which that business can absorb it and the public can absorb it. So there's ways to do things that are sensible, that benefit the community, and also make sure our businesses grow, not decline.
Thank you. Billy Joyce.
When it comes to small business, I think our reduction of the corporate income tax from 15% to 10% will help employers actually reinvest in their human resources. I don't think it's the business of government to tell private businesses what they should or should not be paying their employees. That should be a private sector matter. When you look at the barriers we want to take down as far as internal trade goes, trade between the provinces, and as well as the bringing the pipeline into Atlantic Canada, I think those will have significant like offshoot businesses. All kinds of different service businesses could result from having these pipelines come into Atlantic Canada. So our tax plan will do enough to ensure that employers can pay more to their employees.
Thank you. Mike Hellway.
I'll take up that task. I'm not sure if the mayor is here or if the question was sent, but the idea of working with the mayor of Port Hawkesbury and all mayors and MLAs in our region to look at the importance of an affordable wage, you better believe I'll be a part of that, and I'll be a part of that in a meaningful way. So we can do it together. My campaign slogan is that it starts with community. And that's not just words thrown together for some type of marketing plan. That is sitting down with the mayor of Port Hawkesbury and council and other mayors and council and wardens and come up with a Cape Breton plan that may work for the rest of Canada. We've done it before in our history. We can do it again. I look at hope versus fear. I look at actions that we've taken as a community and as Cape Breton-Canso as a riding in the past. We can work together to make a difference when it comes to a livable wage. I look forward to that challenge and that opportunity.
Thank you. Alfie McLeod.
Well, the question was really about small business, not mayors and wardens. And the question was, how do we help small business survive and move forward and grow the economy? First thing is you get rid of all the small business and tax incentives that were put in place by the current government. You also look at what are the needs of the community, what are the needs of the small business person. Again, you have to go back to the people that are actually doing the work and ask them what it is they need to make the industry work for them. They're the ones that are on the ground. For any politician to tell you they're an expert on what's going on and how to run small business, it's not accurate. We need to be sure that we are working with them to make it easier for them to make sure that they can move forward. One of the things is reducing all these crazy regulations that are in place that make it so hard.
10 seconds.
A day doing work for the provincial government is a day wasted by a small business person.
Thank you. Laurie Suter.
I think it needs to be recognized, the integrity of any small business owner that has acknowledged that it's estimated right now that you need to make basically $20 an hour in order to keep up with inflation and the cost of basic needs currently, and how difficult that is for any small business owner to maintain. But there are ways we can do it. We have absolutely no trouble, apparently, forking out millions or even billions to support bigger corporations who take the money and leave when they've run out. So there certainly are ways we could provide meaningful incentives to small business. We can alter tax structures so that it is possible to survive and still pay out a living wage. I think that we can explore with small businesses what they see as some of the solutions, as well as making structural changes in terms of taxes and incentives that work for
10
small
seconds.
business.
Thank you. Floor is open for 1 minute. Any follow-up or rebuttal?
by taking away the 1.5 billion in money that's going out in corporate welfare, redirecting that back to Canadians, cutting the cost of home energy and the HST off of heating oil will help people survive easier in their homes and will make it easier for people to work and have a good quality of life. So we have to stop, as Laurie said, giving money away to corporations all the time, and we have to look at how do we help the people that grow this country.
25 seconds left.
The People's Party of Canada would like to eliminate all corporate subsidies, not just 15% of them. We also want to get rid of any inefficient government intervention, bailouts of failing companies, grants to companies that don't need them, conditional loans and loan guarantees with implicit subsidy tax credits, etc. These things unfairly support some companies or business sectors.
5 seconds.
We will generate savings of between 5 billion and 10 billion annually by cutting these corporate subsidies.
Thank you.
Okay, can I cut in? Is that okay?
10 seconds.
Okay, 10 seconds. We spoke about leadership before, and we talked about Scheer. And in the last Parliament, he voted against the child tax benefit and a middle tax cut. To me, that's not leadership, and that's the opposite of leadership.
Thank you. Our second question was submitted by John Roulette from Bell Alliance on the topic of immigration. Population decline and access to skilled labor continue to be a major challenge faced by businesses in Nova Scotia, particularly in rural areas. The influx of foreign students, the arrival of Syrian refugee families, and projects such as the Atlantic Immigration Pilot provide some opportunity to address these challenges. What specific action will your government take to ensure that immigration continues to be a demographic and economic driver in our region? We start with Billy Joyce.
When it comes to immigration right now, out of the 350,000 that are brought in, only 55% of them, and that includes their families, are of the economic immigrant nature. What the People's Party of Canada wants to do is reduce the total number of immigrants coming in to 150,000, but increase the number of economic immigrants to 90% of those immigrants. Right now, we're bringing in refugees from the United States that are in no danger whatsoever where they're coming from, to the tune of 60,000. It's becoming a strain on all of our social services. And we feel that the only way that you can ensure the prosperity of Canadians is to bring in more people that are contributing to the system rather than people that are draining the system.
15 seconds. Thank you.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Mike Kellaway.
Well, it's not going to surprise the audience that I'm slightly different from Billy on this one. But one specific action item that we'll take is a municipal nominee program to allow communities, chambers of commerce, Labour's Council to directly sponsor permanent immigrants. Again, diversity breeds strength, it breeds opportunity, and it breeds growth. We need to look at it from a different perspective. And we need programs that reach out to those that deal with small business, the chambers, the Labour Council, and Cape Breton Partnership, and other groups that fundamentally work with those in those areas, to grow those areas. To have them have access to this program directly is a major thing.
Thank you. Alfie McLeod.
Well, I think it's important that we remember one thing. Outside our First Nation people, we're all immigrants to this country. We're all people that came here. My grandparents only came here in 1909. We are all immigrants. What we need to look at is a balance to make sure that the people that we're asking to come into our country, that they fill the voids that are here, the jobs that we need to do. There are lots of things and lots of people we need. And we look at doctors. We need doctors to come to our country, so we should be helping to immigrate and work with them to get more people like that here. We should look at the unofficial entry points that are on the borders, allowing people to come in without going through the proper channels. We need immigration, but do you put a number on it? Or do you look at what the needs of our country are, what we can do as a country to make it work for us and for them? Or do we just put an arbitrary number on it because it sounds good in the media?
Thank you. Laurie Suter.
Let's get comfortable with difference. No matter how much the financial drivers in communities welcome us, feel at home here, and let them know that we appreciate their skills and be willing to work alongside people from other cultures and have openness about them as being part of our economic future, we won't be able to retain those populations here, and we need them. Particularly in an area where we have a lot of out-migration, where we are having difficulty retaining people with specific technological skills. You know, we need to be open to that and support it. Jagmeet Singh has said we
15
certainly
seconds.
need to balance national security with immigration policy. So we do need to do that. But let's be open-minded also about building the economy and making that part of our plan.
Thank you. Clive Doucette.
You know, I think there are more platitudes around immigration than just about anything else, and also more, frankly, racist comments. I think what we need to start with is research to find out why some areas of the province, of the country, do so well with immigrants, and why others don't. And there's a real mystery around that. I mean, why is PEI the fastest growing province in the country, and Cape Breton one of the slowest, and not even growing, but declining? We need to know why that. We need proper studies to get that information. We also need to know what exactly does that famous economic person who comes with a ton of money in his pocket, like in Vancouver, what exactly is that between that and that Syrian refugee that arrives in my village? What's the difference between, what's the difference
15
in impact?
seconds.
We need to know these things before, and then we need, as Elizabeth says, we need, on some of these issues, we need an all-party caucus committee. These are big decisions. One committee, one party doesn't have all the answers. We need to get the collective wisdom of the people we elect around these really big issues, and have them come up with recommendations, and then come back to you with their findings.
Thank you. 1 minute.
I'd like to kind of respond to what Mr. Doucette was saying there. In Canada, we do have a distinct values, we have distinct culture. We have values that include democracy, individual rights, including freedom of religious belief and freedom to criticize religion. We have equality between men and women, the equal treatment of all citizens regardless of ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation. The rule of law, separation of state and religion, tolerance and pluralism, and loyalty to the wider society instead of to one's clan or tribe. Official multiculturalism is based on the idea that there's no unified Canadian society and no distinct Canadian identity to integrate into. We don't agree. We want to keep our country united
15
and
seconds.
ensure social cohesion.
Mr. Doucette.
You know, my family goes back 400 odd years, 1632. I am aware that there are a few cultural differences and things that I cherish. And one of the things I'd like to see, something I've never heard anyone else mention, I'd like to see immigrants, all immigrants, as part of their citizenship process, sign on to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Thank you.
That's key to.
Thank you. Our final submitted question, third and final, submitted in advance by Scott Oakley of 1015 The Hawk, is on the topic of leadership. Who are you and why do you want to be an MP? We start with Mike Calloway.
How long do I have?
1 minute.
Okay, it's like a game show. I would say who I am is someone that has worked in Cape Breton-Canso for the past 25 years. I was a small business owner, I'm an educator, I work in educational administration, I've worked with all levels of government, but what I'm most proud about is working with communities to help improve them by working together. It's not the Mike Calloway show. We get together, we look at how we can work to make the communities better. And I would say, for me, the leadership qualities that I have is someone that can unite people, that can focus people, that has the energy, the vitality, and the work experience to make Cape Breton-Canso better. But I can't do it alone, folks. I need you. I need all of you. We need to work together. Leadership is about serving. I'm honored to be here tonight to tell you that it is about serving and doing your best and working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Alvin McLeod.
I'm a father, I'm a husband. There's nothing more important than family. But my family is also Cape Breton-Canso and Cape Breton Island and Nova Scotia. And what I've done over the last 45 years is I've given back to my community every opportunity that I've had. I've sat with many, many different groups in many different areas. I've worked with legions, I've worked with fire departments, I've worked with charity groups and development groups to try to make the stock of the people that live in Cape Breton-Canso better than it was yesterday. There is no way that I have all the solutions, but what I do have is energy, drive, and a desire to make things better tomorrow than they are today.
Thank you. Lori Suter.
I worked as a teacher and I've worked in community services, and I have worked as the Intergovernmental Relations and Partnership Advisor for the Unamundi Institute of Natural Resources. I've been the provincial co-chair of the Sustainable Communities Initiative, which broke down silos between all 4 levels of government and created collaborative tables to solve issues of mutual environmental concern and economic concern. I work as a therapist and a counselor, and as a crisis counselor, and I work for families with children with autism. I've also worked as a project manager and continue to do so in climate change adaptation and mitigation in First Nation communities, because they are on the front lines of climate change. They have been relocated to the communities that are most at risk and are most vulnerable.
10 seconds.
I'm doing this because I can't forget the faces of the people who have crossed my path over my years of work. I'm tired of saying we can't do things. I'm tired of saying no. I want to affect policies that will allow me to say yes to what people need.
Thank you. Clive Doucette.
That's a hard question to answer. My campaign manager says I should brag more, but the thing I like doing most is playing my guitar to my grandchildren. That's the thing I like most. And I love campaigning. I love the chance to meet with people and hear what's going on. And I love life. And one of the reasons I'm running is I realize that part of loving life right now is running for the Green Party at this seminal time. Children all over the world are protesting, saying, we want you, the old people, to do something about what you're leaving us. So I'm delighted to be here. You can bet your booties I'm campaigning really hard, and I intend to do that not for my own soul. So when I pick up that guitar with my kids, I'm singing it from the right place.
Thank you. Billy Joyce.
I'm not very good, by the way.
I've spent all but 6 months of my life living in Breton-Canso, and I want to do everything in my power to make sure that my daughters and my future grandkids are able to grow up here and live here, because Breton-Canso is by far the best place to live on the face of the planet. When I see some of the things that are going on in our country with people not able to get work and people not able to get housing, I mean, in our area we have an unemployment rate of 14%. Alberta can brag about the lowest employment rate as far as the nation goes, but locally it's at 14%. I've seen Alma Dam lose over 50% of its population in the last 30 years. Breton-Canso has lost 30% of its population in the last 30 years. So what exactly is it that our governments, subsequent governments, have done right if that's the situation?
15 seconds.
So when I'm running, when people ask me why I'm running for politics, it's because I want my kids to be secure, both financially and socially. And that's why I'm running, and that's why I feel I'd be a good leader with my economic development experience, and the fact that I'm always willing to sacrifice to make sure that my employees at the radio station are paid before I am.
Thank you. We have 60 seconds for open floor for any further discussion or rebuttal. Okay.
Well, if no one wants to go, I may as well say a few words. If you've got a minute, no one wants to use it. When people ask me what's special about Breton-Canso, it's the people. And I'm not going to stand here and make promises that I can't keep. I'm not going to make promises from a federal perspective that are supposed to be provincial jurisdiction. The only promise I make is to come back into the community after the election's over and meet with the constituents at least 6 times a year. This riding is huge, and I can't remember any time where a federal politician has come back here and consulted the community for a full day or a full 2 days and allowed people to either throw eggs at them, insult them, criticize them, or shake their hand and tell them that they're doing a good job. We're tired of this top-down approach. And the reason that Maxime Bernier called this party the People's Party of Canada is because we want a government that's by the people, for the people.
Thank you. Moving on to our closing remarks for the evening. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for their closing remarks, and we will go in a randomly selected order. Our first candidate is Billy Joyce of the People's Party of Canada. You have 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a crossroads in this country. The election is not about left and right. The election is about globalism versus patriotism. Will we allow ourselves to be governed by the United Nations and their many offshoots? Or will the people of Canada stand up and take back their country from the 4 political parties that have sold us out to foreign interests over the past 50 years or so? I pray that the people of Breton-Canso will see through the hollow promises of Liberals and remember the ethics violations, the pandering to foreign industries, foreign interests, the insults to our construction workers, and the many occasions that Mr. Trudeau disrespected hardworking Canadians while playing Mr. Dress-Up all over the world. With all due respect to Mr. MacLeod, we've spent most of this evening discussing problems and matters that are supposed to be provincial jurisdiction. Mr. MacLeod was at the helm at the province at one point, and we haven't seen too much in the way of healthcare, transportation, infrastructure, and housing. We're still discussing these problems. The Conservatives voted in favor of the Paris Accord. They shut down the Veterans Affairs Office while Harper was in power. They signed us into the Organization for Islamic Cooperation and signed us onto United Nations agendas that rob Canada of its sovereignty. They've all had 50 years to use Section 92.10 to run the pipelines across the country and end our reliance on foreign oil. But they haven't done that yet. Do we believe they're going to do it now? The NDP and the Greens want to spend, while crippling our natural resources, even suggesting that we should eliminate cattle because their flatulence contributes to global warming. There is no real scientific consensus, only the consensus of the United Nations and their affiliates. Canadians can govern their own country and protect their own environment. The other parties have made over $100 billion in campaign promises since the election was called, items they stole from our platform in many cases, but they failed to address the debt and how they plan to reduce it or eliminate it. Maxime Bernier is the only leader that will allow members to present a private member bill on abortion. Do you agree with using tax dollars to terminate pregnancies at 8 months gestation? Our abortion laws have not been touched since 1988. I have 8 adopted first cousins, and I will put this back on the table. We don't want to take away a woman's right to choose. We just want to make sure that it's an informed choice based on all the evidence we have today for fetal life development. We share the honor right now of having the least laws on abortion with countries like China and North Korea. Je suis complètement bilingue. Je pourrais desservir les communautés de Chéticans, Richemont et Panquette de leur langue maternelle. Je suis tanné du statu quo et que les citoyens de Panquette, Richemont et Chéticans puissent avoir des services dans leur langage. You will hear cries of racism, misogyny, woman-hater, and then some, but remember, Socrates once said, when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. Our platform is nothing but common sense. That is why we're calling this a common sense revolution. It's time to take our country back. It's time to kick the United Nations to the curb and decide our own destiny.
Thank you. Our next closing remark is from Clive Doucette of the Green Party. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Doucette.
Well, following building choice is kind of a task, eh? The United Nations, the last time I looked at its budget, was smaller than the city of Ottawa. So I don't see how it's going to take over the world anytime soon. You know, when I look at, I'm debating these folks for quite a while now, and you hear there's really a common thread. There's a common thread that the status quo isn't working, and it's not. Right now we've got this sort of game of tennis between the two sides. I mean, the Liberals get elected to do something, and then the other side gets elected and take it apart, and then back again we go. It's like this. It's not working. It worked for a long time. It doesn't work anymore. Hasn't worked. And I think almost all, including I heard Alfie say he didn't like the status quo either. So we've got just about unanimity that the status quo is not working. So what are we going to do about it? Well, the reason I'm here, really the central reason, and it wasn't Elizabeth phoning me up about it. It was sudden realization, like a sort of a Paul on the way to Damascus, that this was a hugely important election and that nothing was going to change unless we had a change in Ottawa that was significant. And the Greens are a significant change. This is an opportunity that comes along in once in our lifetime. We'll never have quite this opportunity again. Because if we send a Green person from our island to Ottawa, let me tell you, the entire city will notice. And I think all of Cape Breton will notice. How many deputies we have? 338. We add another member from one of the old parties. Let me tell you, they will be catching their plane back to Cape Breton when they finish their duties in Ottawa. And I think no one's going to notice the arrival or the departure. That's the raw truth. If we vote for a Green Party, we're saying we want to send someone to Washington to negotiate that threatened boycott of our crab industry. We want to send someone with new kind of credibility, not the old system. And a Green deputy, I'm just being from Mr. Joyce, will have a different credibility in Washington, a very different one. It'll say to people in Washington that the people in Cape Breton are not about killing whales. They're They're interested in a sustainable island where the whales have their life, but also the fishermen have their life.
30 seconds.
And we won't tolerate, we don't want to have one put against the other. And so often in the climate change debate we have this, it's the whales and the fishermen. It's both, and we have to defend both.
Thank you. Next closing statement will be from Lori Suter of the NDP. You have 3 minutes.
We live in a very complicated time. On the one hand, we are seeing a global economy like we have never seen before. We're seeing coalitions of countries and trade agreements and trade pressures that we have not seen in the past. On the other hand, we're seeing an erosion of basic services to the ordinary citizen of this country and in this constituency that we have not seen for a very long time, since they were implemented. We need decision makers and policies and thoughtful, intelligent governance that is going to steer us through this time. If you have any doubts about climate change, talk to the insurance industry, talk to the Engineers Canada organization, because they are on the front lines of dealing with climate change events. And climate change is not just about global warming. It's about seasonal shifting. It's about freeze-thaw cycles that are happening rapidly. It's about these other effects that are impacting the web of life upon which we depend. And I'd like to take a moment to talk about the Indigenous people of this land. And I'd like to do so, which I hadn't planned to do, in memory of my cousin Darren Lee Solomon, who was a full-blooded Cree, who lived the Indigenous story in this country and on this land, and who became my kin as a child, and who, like many Indigenous people, died too early of a heart that gave out. They welcomed us, First Nation people in this country, when we were sick with scurvy and didn't know how to survive here. They sheltered us, they fed us, and they got us through the harsh winter months. And our response was to destroy the web of life that they understood so well, and that they have waited more than 500 years for us to listen to them tell us about, and we are still not listening. Our response was to take their children and put them in institutions where they were systematically sexually and physically abused, where they were subjected to medical experimentation, including starvation and unnecessary surgeries without proper anesthetic, which was disfiguring and painful. That was our relationship to them, and they are still patiently waiting. When I hear people talk about defending freedom of speech in this country, this is Canada. The only freedom of speech you don't have is the freedom of speech of hate. So what freedom of speech are you defending and wanting to access?
30 seconds.
We have to put our efforts into this diverse, complicated, beautiful, messy, democratic country. And if you give me your vote, I will roll up my sleeves and go to work to preserve those things that matter to every one of us and work every day to make that happen, to make our full destiny realized. When I worked for...
Thank you. The next closing statement will come from Alfie MacLeod of the Conservative Party of Canada.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank you all for coming here today, and I want to congratulate all my colleagues here at the head table for being a part of a very important process. I bet you noticed that I was a little bit nervous tonight. And I was. And I'll tell you why I was nervous. Because what's at stake here is huge. It's the future of our community. It's the future of our country. The decision you're going to make in the upcoming election will have an impact, maybe not on us in this room, but on our children and our grandchildren. And we need to make sure we make the right decision. We need to know that whoever you decide to send to Ottawa to represent you is going there willing to work, understanding the riding that they're representing, and caring about making a difference. Will we change it overnight? No. But will we change it? I think I can, with your help. As I said to Andrew Scheer when he approached me about running, if he was looking for a yes man, he was looking in the wrong direction. Because my first obligation will be to the people who elect me, the constituents of this riding. it will always come first. I want to be the voice of Cape Breton-Canso in Ottawa, not Ottawa's voice here in Cape Breton-Canso. And I know from experience, from working with many, many different community groups across this province and across this great riding, that every problem is different. And what will work in Canso may not work in Judic, but might work in Sydney River. The concerns of people in Glace Bay and the concerns of people in all the other parts of this riding are the same. Are we going to have a good life for our families? I think that I'm your option for that good life.
Thank you. Final candidate, Mike Kellaway of the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you. And thank you to the Hawk and to the Chamber for putting this on and for you to come here tonight. The Strait area has always been a proud region in terms of being entrepreneurial and taking leadership over their community and making a difference in their community. That's what I want to do for you. I want to serve you. I want to work with you. Over the past number of years, I've worked with different communities to establish collaborative health clinics in our region, to look at new recruitment ways and processes to bring new doctors here. It's about new beginnings in Cape Breton-Canso. It's about new chapters. It's about new opportunities. We've heard tonight that there's a lot of challenges, and there are a lot of challenges. As someone that is in the foxhole, working with so many of you in the room and so many of you outside this room, there are many. But there is a lot happening in our region with respect to leadership. A lot of community groups are stepping up and wanting to be a part of the process. Being a community activist for the past 25 years, being in education for the past 25 years, running my own business, championing the causes of the little person who feels they can't get something done, but they reach out to the group that I started in Cape Breton-Canso. That's what I want to do for you. I want to serve you. I want you to be my boss. Again, it's about new beginnings, new opportunities. When you go into the ballot box, the question you have to ask is, who do you want in that foxhole working for you, collaborating for you, fighting for you? I've demonstrated over the past number of years that I will not be a yes person. You can look at many of my statements recently about economic development and innovation hubs when it comes to transportation. I believe we're at a time where we need a new style of leadership. We need a new approach. We need new leadership with fresh ideas. And I want you to be a part of that journey with me. That's the sincerity that I have, the authenticity that I have, the transparency that I have. And I want to work for you. I want to serve you. We have a lot of challenges, but together, one by one, I believe we can make a fundamental difference in Ottawa, in Halifax, in Cape Breton-Canso, in Port Hawkesbury, you name the place. I believe when we're coordinated and we're collaborating and we have focus and drive and we have the experience behind it, good things will happen. You need someone that has experience working with all sectors, all governments, not-for-profits. You need someone with that experience. Not someone who says they have that experience, but someone has demonstrated with actionable outcomes. I've done that. I thank you for a great evening. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank everyone here on the panel. It's been a lot of fun. It's been introspective, but there's much work to do. So thank you so much for tonight. Great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates. We have some closing remarks from Amanda Mumberket, the Executive Director of the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce.
So I just want to echo the comments of the candidates. Thank you so much to 1015 The Hawk for partnering with the Chamber on this debate. Could not do it without them. I, of course, want to thank the audience here, but also our audience on Facebook Live with us tonight. I've heard there may be some challenges with sound quality, but we've done our best to make sure that this was accessible by everyone, regardless of where you are tonight. I'd also want to say a special thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We had over a dozen questions submitted, and so we, the planning team kind of looked at them all, looked at the things that we wanted to ask anyways, and we were able to fill in some really wonderful blanks with them. So a special thanks to those folks. We did a little bit of rewording for clarity, but we made sure to capture the spirit of what they had sent in to us. And just for clarification, sort of on the format of this debate, our decision as a planning team was to invite candidates from parties with members in the House just before the election call to manage the time and to make sure that we could address all of the questions that we felt were important to the economy and to the chamber members in this region. What we have done, though, is extended the invitation to all parties running in this region to provide us with a written summary, a short summary that we can send out to the chamber membership and also to the general public through Facebook and other social media platforms that we use, just to kind of give everybody a sense of what the priorities are of all of the candidates running. I think that's about it. I guess a special thank you to the candidates. It's not an easy decision to make, to put your name up for election. It's a brave thing, certainly in these times where there's so much opportunity to engage with people from all kinds of backgrounds. Sometimes when you stick out your neck, your head gets chopped up a little bit, but so thank you for your bravery and thank you for your commitment. It's a wonderful public service that you're all doing here, and best of luck with your campaign. Thank you, everyone.
Great job. I'm actually on a thread, but all of this on Facebook. Thanks.